Parents of tweens, if you're familiar with far-off drop-offs...
Dad, stop, right here.
Or get DMs about what's for dinner, you may be experiencing tween milestones. For your son or daughter, these can start at age 9. HPV vaccination, a type of cancer prevention against certain HPV-related cancers, can start then too.
For most, HPV clears on its own. But for those who don't clear the virus, it can cause certain cancers later in life.
Embrace this phase. Help protect them in the next.
Ask their doctor today about HPV vaccination. Brought to you by Merck.
Welcome back to the Boundary Corner podcast. My name is Curtis Wilson.
I'm Brian Siegler. It is a Thursday night, good buddy. What you drinking on?
Thirsty Thursday, having a little Genesee beer, watching the snow come down outside. School's closed for the kid and the wife tomorrow. I'm working them half a day. Good night to record, man.
Yes, it is, man. I've got my hams here. I'm watching some snow as well. We got about an inch so far. It's sticking a little bit. It's kind of, ebbing and flowing between big fluffy flakes and flurries, but looks like we're going to have a little bit of fun in the snow tomorrow, buddy.
We are going to have a little fun in the snow tomorrow. I don't plan on going anywhere. I've got 10 beers in the fridge, a couple fifths if I want a little drink, food for the fam. Although if my wife, being, with child as she is, if she said, honey, I want this from here, I would trudge my butt out and I'd go get it because I am a smart man.
You know what's happening. You know what's up.
Hey, once you've been there. Once it's happened, it's like you know what to do. You don't overthink it. You just do it. I'm sitting here also watching golf out at Pebble Beach. It looks like it's about 68 degrees, perfect weather. So I'm also longing for a good spring day now. Yeah. Like after this, I think I'm done with winter. Like doesn't need snow anymore. Let's get warm.
You like Bane.
Get outside.
I'll be done with you. You have my permission to die.
All right, Hokie fans. So what we're going to be talking about tonight, my biggest thing is we're going to be looking at the Brad Cornelsen and the Justin Hamilton press conferences from a couple days ago, breaking down some things they said, some things we heard we liked, some things we heard we didn't like, and a couple shots here and there. But before we jump to that, Brian, we're going to jump to a non-football related thing. In Virginia Tech wrestling, and that epic win versus NC State, man. Holy moly.
Epic win. So, that was one of the best. I don't watch wrestling normally. So, yeah. Not that I'm very familiar with it. I used to go to a lot of stuff in high school and things like that, but it's been a long time since I've watched something like this live, and it was a great watch. And the back and forth and then the epic finish. Most everybody thought it was over, and then it wasn't. And then we pull it out. And then I was just like, I was on the edge of my seat. I know that there was someone else that was calling this that was really, really on the edge of their seat, both literally and figuratively.
Rock Harrison, man. First of all, he's a UVA grad, but a billion kudos to that guy. A billion. He kept it engaging. He broke it down sort of simplistically for folks like me and you who don't watch a lot of wrestling, and unfortunately in COVID times, probably friends that we could have over to watch the wrestling with us. We really can't get together. It's too tough. He made it exciting. And by the way, he joined Twitter this week. I followed him immediately just because. And then they showed his, is it two? Is it two? Is it two? It's two! But it was so much energy, and, you know, I think what we just saw is, for us as very casual fans, that was a top 10 matchup. And I think probably my expectations now is I look on ACC Network, Big Ten Network, ESPN. If I see like two top 10 teams going at it in wrestling, whether associated with the Hokies or not, I think I'll probably stop and watch for a little while, because I think, the level of competition, when it's that high, it's really good.
Level of competition is awesome. The passion that they bring to the table, both from an individual perspective and from the team perspective, and how they were really getting each other up for the matches. I mean, it was awesome to watch. And like you said, I'm definitely gonna, if I see it in passing, I'll at least give it 10, 20 minutes of my time if I've got some time to kill there, because that was fun to watch. That was a really good time.
And after that, when the Hokies go from number 8 to number 4 in the country, and you see a lot of, when we watch the Hokies, a lot of the Hokies guys had pretty high numbers next to their name. So individually, they are very high ranked. And my buddy David Fuqua, who wrestled at Longwood, he's a fraternity brother. I'm a big Hokies fan. Brian, you got to meet him last year in Blacksburg. He gave me a little bit of insight in kind of the way I'm kind of feeling it is, this is a potential national championship team. Not only for individuals like Mackay was a few years ago, but all around it could happen, because all of these guys has potential to go far once the NCAA tournament happens in St. Louis. So really big. And then tomorrow night, Pitt Panthers, number 16.
Sir, number 16.
Again, kudos to ACC Network. Friday Night Wrestling. It's at 6, not 8. I'll try to put it on for a little while. And definitely do the follow-up. So, hey, Brian, guess what?
What's up, man?
I was right.
Yeah, you were. Yeah, you got this one on me. My Tom Brady hate did not come to fruition. He got it done, along with fellow Hokies, Bruce Arians, Cody Grimm, Nick Rapone. I mean, that really wasn't a game at all. I mean, it was competitive in the first quarter, and then the couple of adjustments defensively that were made to kind of stop those little short drives that Kansas City was able to have just completely took their offense out of the game. And let's start there. You kind of need your tackles to have success against a good pass rush, right?
You right, you do. Damn right. It was brutal. I mean, they took full advantage of a banged up offensive line. And again, it's great having 3 Hokies, going to have those Super Bowl rings, especially, it's great for Bruce because, Brian, Bruce was with your Colts. And I think you saw back years ago, like, this guy's a damn good head coach, pays off in a ring. For us of our generation, Cody Grimm was one of those Hokies, man. The best whip you ever seen. And Cody played a few years in the league. And now he is shining as a coach. Nick Rapone's an older Hokie. Respect to all of them, but now you got 3 rings coming back to Blacksburg, which is awesome. Now, counter before we get into the press conferences here, guys. Unfortunately, basketball, Louisville game, revenge game, postponed due to COVID issues. Obviously, if you hadn't read the news, Chris Mack, Louisville head coach, tested positive for Hokies about 4 days ago. So essentially, he was not going to be there, and it seems like through contact tracing, the ugliest word currently in the sporting language, pretty much benched them. And I mean, Brian was just looking at his phone right before we got on here. Brian, the Hokies aren't going to play another home game, for like 2 more weeks?
Yeah, we're still looks like February 23rd against Georgia Tech is what we're looking at now. So yeah, we're still 2 weeks away from the Hokies playing another home game here. In terms of getting Boots back and in terms of getting a couple of the guys that have been banged up back, probably a good thing. But in terms of the, riding the wave of consistency that this team has had and just playing out there for the fans, I mean, that those aspects definitely, suck with all these cancellations, no doubt.
It does suck. But I do think this, and I think I can't remember who I heard mention it. I can't remember if it was on the radio today or when I was watching CBS Sports maybe. But basically, regardless what happens with the Hokies between now and they're in. Like because of having such good wins and the record, they're in. Seeding's going to be more of the importance. I've told you, Brian, my opinion. I don't want to be a 3 or a 4. I feel like when they play teams of lesser ability, it seems like we lose our focus. I want to be in that 6-7 range. I want us to have a team across from us that we know the name on the jersey and we have to take extremely serious.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I definitely think having opponent that you've got to get up for. We seem to show up and show out when it counts, even more so than when it doesn't. So I would definitely prefer that middle to back third seating. But getting a higher seating would be a good prestige pick for the Hokies. So you kind of weigh that. What matters more? Do you kind of hedge your bets on what you think will be the best setup, or do you kind of just want to go for that prestige move and have that lower number next to your name?
Yeah, it's a coin flip. You love the prestige, but maybe it's maroon glasses. I see this team as a team, if it catches fire, of all the teams I've seen this year. I have not watched as much as I normally watch. Just, blame football season because I normally watch a lot of football anyway, but when you're doing a podcast and you're up till 2:00 every Saturday night, you kind of got to know what mama got to cut down somewhere. So basketball got the cut. I think that team can catch fire. I think they can beat any team in the country on any given night in any given floor. That's my opinion.
We shall see, man. We shall see. The next 3 weeks or so is going to be some good conference basketball. Then we get into the tournament.
Yes, sir, we do. All right, guys. Let's jump to it real quick. We're going to start with the pressers. We're going to start with the Brad Cornelsen presser first. And I'm going to just jump right into it. One of the first questions they asked him was essentially about the quarterback room, primarily about Connor Blumrick. First of all, he is essentially everything you heard in that presser, Brian. He's essentially the backup quarterback.
Yeah, that it seems like what is going on here is that Corn likes what he sees on practice tape for Connor, and he's really trusting Daryl Dickey's opinion.
Well, Daryl Dickey's, kind of the man that probably should be here. I don't think we would.
Yeah, Daryl Dickey probably should have Corn's job if the stars would have aligned the way we would have hoped when we initially brought in Justin Fuente. But that's neither here nor there. This is not about bashing Corn necessarily. It's about what was actually said in the presser. So, so it looks like Connor Blumrick is going to be the de facto backup at this point. Looks like Knox is going to potentially compete for that role, whereas you got a guy like Taj Bullock that's coming in that's probably going to need at least one year of seasoning before he starts competing for a 2 deep at the quarterback position.
Yeah. I mean, and of course he's going to have spring ball and stuff to help him. He's going through drill, he's going through workouts right now and they're seeing more and more of him. But Brian, even though this was later on in the press conference, not now, it's kind of Brad's talking out of both sides of his mouth because he says, well, we need a quarterback to develop for 3 years. First of all, Connor Blumrick had not been in a quarterback room for 3 years. kind of the way it looks, he'd been between the running back room, the tight end room, the quarterback room, special teams room all the time. So what you're de facto saying, and it scares the shit out of me, is if Braxton Burmeister, who is a very capable quarterback to win games and run the offense, if he goes down, the guy who's been the jack of all trades for Texas A&M is our backup quarterback, who probably hasn't played a full season in 4 years? He was in high school?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, you know, if he's just running some QB powers and handing the ball off to Holston or whoever the running back is for us, you know, you feel comfortable with him doing things like that. When it gets into reading coverages and making throws on time and accurately, you know, you don't feel quite as good because you haven't seen him do it at a Power 5 level consistently, and B, he's been, you know, learning in rooms that aren't a quarterback room for the last, at least season and a half, correct?
Yeah, at least, if not longer, because he was 17, right? 3-star back in 17. So 17, 18, 19.
So probably at least 2 years then. I'll move to 2 years.
I'll go 2 years. He probably spent a couple years in the QB room primarily, but obviously with Kellen Mond there, you know, Kellen Mond took that job and he never had a chance to sniff it. Something else that, you know, Brad said, and kind of, again, it's going against what's happening. He prefers to have 5 quarterbacks on the roster. Well, we have 4.
Yeah. He said he's good with 4 or 5, but, you know, at this point, he's, you know, we're at the underside of that. And in my opinion, 4 isn't bad if you had a situation like we had last year.
Yeah.
4 is bad when you have a situation like we have rolling into 21, where you've got really, truly one experienced quarterback, one quarterback that's mostly an athlete that hasn't really been engrossed in the position in the last 2 years, one that is still coming along, and one that's a true freshman.
Exactly. And, you know, last year we sat not too long after, you know, our first episode last year. And we talked about how our quarterback room was the deepest quarterback room in the country, in which it was. And it proved during the season it was, because all 3 guys at some point in time played at a very high level. But now we're probably among the thinnest. You know, we have one guy that started, one guy that's only played what Knox play, quarter and a half against Clemson.
Yeah.
Didn't play next week. And, you know, we sit here, you know, it's just not good. And the way he framed it is we're not looking for another one, which is a massive mistake. I think we could find FCS, FBS, G5. We could find a better backup quarterback than Connor Bohnrecht. That's my opinion.
Not necessarily better, but at least one that has had enough reps recently where if Connor isn't what you think he is, you've got a plan B. You know what I'm saying? That's kind of what bothers me more. It's not so much that Connor doesn't have the potential to go out there and do good things as a backup for Braxton. It's that we don't know that, and not knowing that, not having a plan B of someone that can at least go out there and make the throws and do the things that you need to do. You know, other guys can step up the slack for a guy that can at least do all the little things, but we don't know even if Connor can do all those things. And I think that's what is more concerning. But the other thing that was concerning, or at least was concerning to the timeline, the Twitter feed, was some of the comments about the 2 of the quarterbacks that transferred out of the program, Curtis.
Yep. It absolutely was. It was a tweet out there by Norm Wood that the way it framed it absolutely sounded terrible in the way Brad said it. But, you know, in reality, the way he made that statement, it was not as bad as it seemed. It wasn't. We literally today, me and Brian sat while we were working our normal jobs. We got in a quick call together and said, let's play it, let's listen to it, and we'll talk about it. don't like when reporters do that because for us, unfortunately, we don't get the live stream. Because if we got the live stream and people like me and you are listening, and Norm did that sort of bullshit, you don't think me and you would be on that timeline saying, "Hey, Norm, bullshit, you dumbass."
We could call this out in real time instead of having to, fight the narrative that's already in place. And I'm not saying we're out here white knighting for Brad Cornelsen, because we're definitely not. But what we're saying here is that the way the comment was framed by Norm and the narrative in general and the sentiment among the fan base in general about Brad Cornelsen, that was only going to go badly. And Norm Wood knew that when he tweeted it in such a way. Do I think that Cornelsen did a great job of saying the words that he needed to say? No, he probably said as few words to describe what he was trying to get across as possible. But I don't think he was saying, well, we expected to lose 2 guys. That was always the plan from Jump Street. No, he's essentially saying, if you got 3 quarterbacks that can play football at a pretty high level, they're all within a similar ballpark of each other in terms of eligibility remaining, especially the 2 younger guys, in Hooker and Quincy. They're going to want to get on the field. And if they don't have an opportunity to do that here, they're going to take that opportunity to do it somewhere else because they're too talented to not be on the field. I don't think he said it as good as that. And I probably am not saying it as good as I want to say it, but
No. It's
in the context of the actual answer, it sounded better than we expected 2 guys to transfer and then just kind of let it hang out there in space.
Yeah. Again, and overall, Brad, with the entire press conference, is he the worst ever? No. Is he the best ever? No. He's somewhere in the middle, like most people are. If they're going to put him out there the way they talked about putting him out there, go get somebody to help him out. Go get somebody to help him out because he needs it. Maybe he's the guy that needs to stand up versus sitting down. Who the heck knows?
Yeah, Fuente likes sitting down. Maybe Cornelsen's a stander. Who knows? He likes to lean on the podium. The leaning on the podium makes him comfortable. It's like a security blanket. I don't know. I always like leaning on a podium. I'm not a sitter.
I've always liked things. You lean on things, you feel like, you can change your position. You can, move constantly. All right. Well, with all that, essentially Braxton is the de facto starter as of today. It's still weird that he had to say that since no other quarterback had started games on the roster before then. But something he made a point of, Brian, and I want to ask you from looking at Braxton's, games last year. He talked about, some of his throws, he takes stuff off. Me and you talking earlier, he has got the oppo of Michael Vick, where Michael Vick, you were in a 4-yard hit. You better be ready because it was going to be a rocket coming out. And there are stories, and not only Michael Vick, but other quarterbacks too, about breaking guys' fingers because, listen, you're on a 4-yard hitch. I'm getting it there as quick as possible. But Braxton's a little different. And can you see that from some of the stuff we saw last year?
Yeah, and I think some of that goes into thinking too much. You want a quarterback making reads, but you don't want a quarterback thinking about the throw he's making. That at that point, because between reps and everything else, how that throw comes out should kind of be second nature. And it looks like he's overthinking that aspect of his game at this point where, and it may be something to do with because he doesn't have the strongest arm when he can let it loose. He's trying to let it loose as much as he can. And then when it's not that 20-yard throw downfield, he's taking a little bit more off of it than he should. That's my take on it. But it definitely is something that we saw. We saw it sometimes when he was trying to throw those screens, just putting way too much loft on the ball. Some of those little flares and quick outs, too much touch, to the point where guys can break on it, to the point where guys can get in there and get their hands on the ball while it's in flight. So you don't want that on those short passes. And another thing Brad talked about was, getting a little bit more bulk on Braxton going into the season, so he's a little bit more ready to play a 12-game schedule compared to only getting a few games of action and leaving 2 of those with some degree of injury.
Before we jump to the next essentially topic, I have a question. What was he doing there in the whole year he didn't play? I sit here and I heard him say that, and I said, Brian, stop it. Brian, shouldn't he have been putting on weight and putting on muscle when he had nothing to do but lift, put on muscle, put on weight? Again, it's one of those things where it's like, kind of wondered, was Braxton like essentially running a scout team in that situation, even though he couldn't play? To me, some people say, well, that makes a lot of sense. To me, it doesn't, because he can't get on the field. He's running a scout team. He's a really good quarterback. That's awesome. But here's the deal. You're giving reps to him where Quincy could have been getting reps on the scout team, or someone who could have been getting reps on the scout team and been able to go into the play. So I hate that. All right, Brian, I'm going to jump to it because I'm hot, and this is going to make me even hotter. We talked about the running back room and the absurd amount of running backs we currently have on the roster. Brad said, well, the numbers are skewed, and we don't want to recruit that many. Brian stopped it and then asked this question.
Then why did y'all recruit that many?
Including 3 this year. So it's one of these things where it's like, I think there's probably a reason behind it, but again, he's not coached up well enough in a press conference to talk about it. But it doesn't make sense. And now you have 3 guys coming in, and one of those guys, Brian, Kenji, you loved.
Yep.
Kenji, feel like could come in and begin playing. So now I'll say this. Maybe at the end of spring, we lose a lot of running backs and we open up a lot of scholarships for the poor.
It's very possible, man. But, when we're talking about the running back room, I like really all 3 guys that we brought in, but I don't, other than Kenji, there was no must-have with the guys that we already have on the roster. And that's no knock to Chance or Malachi here, but at the same time, we already had 8 or 9 that we were going to be coming back with. Now we got 3 more. So running back room is going to be interesting. Expect some attrition there either after spring or before the season starts, because I don't think we're going to have that many come the end of summer or end of spring. So that's going to be interesting to keep an eye on. The other thing that Brad talked about next was obviously the offensive line, which we've hit on some the last couple weeks with how thin it is. And he did admit that we are light at the offensive tackle position in particular, which I think is something that we kind of know. But interesting enough, he did say Darryl Bailey and Daniel Milichik is going to have a shot at tackle there. I thought Milichik would be more of a guard, so that'll be interesting to see.
Does that worry you? Does that worry you?
It doesn't necessarily worry me because I like this technique. So I think, he's going to need some work. Whereas I think guard would be more of a natural. He'd come in, he'd fit. After a year or so, he might be pushing for the 2 deep. Whereas now he's going to be a tackle and have to essentially be a depth pick there because of all the depth issues that we're having at that position. And he talked about another thing like with false depth, and what he means by that is that there's a bunch of guys that can cross play and play a different position. So you feel like you have, as long as you've got 6 or 7 guys, as long as 3 of those guys can play every position or most positions, that you've got some built-in flexibility there. But that's not the way you want to do it, because to do the old parable here, we're robbing Peter to pay Paul.
Yeah, because if Tenuta gets banged for 2 games and you got to pull Brock Hoffman or Letica Smith to go play left tackle, we're not deep at guard anymore. So you're talking about bringing someone like Caden Moore or Jesse Hansen in who have really no in-game experience. And that's sort of scary. The other scary thing, Brian, at least to me it's scary, is he is discussing that Parker Clement could be pushing for 2 deep.
Yeah.
And I know you had some things with Parker last year, but to say his second season on campus, he's pushing 2 deep.
Yeah, I would have expected 2 deep push maybe next year. But when you lose Nestor and you lose Hudson, you have to start shuffling pieces around. And now, tackle was going to be thin come next season anyway, and then it got immediately thin this season because of those transfers.
Yep. And he sort of did confirm Johnny's going to be the center. Brock's going to move to guard.
He wants to get the 5 best players on the field. I mean, yeah, sure. That's a great philosophy to have. I like that. But we're still looking at the depth issues at tackle, even if we're moving Brock over. So again, I'm not so much concerned about the first 5. I think we're not quite as good as last year, but I think we're still in the ballpark. It's the next 3 that scare me. Because last year, the next 3 were guys that have started a ton of games or guys that were, either redshirt freshmen or redshirt sophomores that had already had significant amount of playing time their first year on campus or their second year on campus.
Absolutely, man. All right, let's jump over to guys on the outside, looking at the wide receiver room. Great news about Jaden Peyote. He should be able to practice some in the spring and then be a full go in the fall. We mentioned it last year that he was going to probably be a huge piece of what we were going to do offensively with his speed. So, knowing that he's going to be coming back is great. Let's hope all heals well and he's getting what he needs there, because the honest truth is, look at how we're built this year offensively. He's going to, Brian, you mentioned it to me, and so I'll say it. He's got to be a big time contributor, whether it's essentially opening up the game or catching balls.
Yeah, I mean, if he's not either coming in and grabbing the slot position or being the primary, one of the primary first guys in the rotation to come in for Trey or Tay, where he can help take the top off of a defense, that's going to be a big problem because we don't really have that guy in terms of a guy that's been on campus for multiple cycles at this point. We got a couple guys coming in that may have that capability, but he's really the guy with that elite level speed that has that capability to take the top off a defense. So getting him as a key contributor will help a lot, because one of the things missing from our passing game last year was any sort of deep threat.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah,
we didn't test people down the field enough, and that hampered what potentially could have been a all-time great running game and just made it a damn good running game.
Damn right on that. Now, something I was kind of shocked about was his praise of Dwayne Lofton and Jalen Jones. Praise to a point when I heard about that, it kind of caught my ear. Like, okay, we're going to have 2, true freshmen getting potentially a lot of snaps. You had Evan Ferris transfer out. They essentially convinced Changa Hodge to hang on another year, and we saw Chang in that last game catch some nice little intermediate routes to essentially relieve the pressure of that. But when you hear them talk about those 2 guys, I know you really like Jalen Jones, and then Dwayne kind of grew on you, and then you saw Dwayne this year in some of his tape and all his accolades, and you got to say, okay, we might have got 2 real deals here.
Yeah, 2 real deals, and I think the wide receiver room is going to be the most interesting one to watch, at least on the offensive side of the ball going into next year, because I feel like from a running back perspective, unless something changes and we bring in another running back, if everything stays as it is, I feel like the first kind of 3 are kind of set, and then the question marks are after that. with the wide receiver, because we need more of them, because with running back, you generally only have one on the field at a time. Wide receiver, you've got 2+ in most cases. It's going to be interesting to see who really steps up behind Trey and Tay this year. Is that going to be Payut? Is that going to be Lofton or Jones? Is that going to be Tyree Saunders? Is that going to be Changa Hodge? Is that going to be a guy like Raheem Blackshear that moves into more of a slot role consistently versus being a number 2 running back or a spell back in the backfield, which would also help with some of the log jam we have at that position. So the wide receiver room is going to be really interesting to watch. That's why I'm glad we actually are getting a spring, because I can at least get an idea of what that is going to look like a little bit better, because last year it was very much of an unknown and it didn't work in our favor. And I feel like having the spring and getting some of these guys in and seeing what a Tyree Saunders can do and seeing what some of these true freshman guys coming in can do, that's going to be good for us heading into the season and already having an idea of their capabilities.
Yep, the spring this year is going to be big, and having James Mitchell back not only for the spring but next fall is absolutely huge. But the one thing I found weird today, Brian, was essentially the offensive coordinator of Virginia Tech had no conversation with him about this. And I mean, he mentioned Coach Fuente did, and some other people did, but he didn't.
Yeah, he said he talked to Coach Fuente and Coach Shabest, and did not have a conversation with the offensive coordinator. Which I mean, not completely off kilter there, but just something doesn't smell right about that. In my opinion, the best all around player on your offense, between what he does blocking, what he does receiving, all of that, what he does even in the jet sweep game. I mean, there's so many aspects that Mitchell plays for this offense. You would think that the offensive coordinator would have some discussion about whether or not he returns to Virginia Tech for another season.
Absolutely.
That's just me.
Yeah, and me and Brian discussed about having James Mitchell. That guy should be at every single position on the field numerous times a game. And something that I want to say it kind of grinded Brian's gears a little bit was talking about come on, big man. You got a little.
So we'll get to it more when we get to some of the hand presser details. But the beef that I have and the vibe that I get, and just watching the presser and the juxtaposition between the two, J-Ham understands editing. J-Ham understands re-engineering. J-Ham understands if something's not working, we need to take a look at it, evaluate it, cut it if necessary, re-engineer it if necessary, and keep it moving. And I feel like with Cornelsen, it's very much a, we do what we do type philosophy to the offense. Which, if he was a high school football coach, that's fine, but he's not. You definitely need to figure out, in my opinion, a good offensive coordinator at the college football level does a good job of getting the ball in his playmakers' hands any way possible and letting them make the plays. It's not a system thing. It's a guy. It's an idea of letting your playmakers do what they do best.
Absolutely. And a guy like James Mitchell, you should want him to at least see 10 to 15 targets a game, and it was not that way. All right, so let's turn off the corn. We don't hate him completely. We were just very critical of him. But the next guy, when he came on the mic, it was just different. And, the first thing he touched on was Jack's promotion in JC, Brian. And, obviously he's got the relationship with JC. JC was a GA when he, was a player. He essentially mentioned it several times about being part of the brotherhood. And he talks about, Cap leaving. It's a great person, once in a lifetime person. And, when you have to replace somebody like that, JC, you start checking the boxes, and JC checked them all.
Yep. He checked a lot of the boxes. He's talking about Tap as an individual cannot be replaced, but Tap in terms of the work he did, JC checks a lot of those boxes. JC checks, the various things that Tap kind of was, you would say it were positive attributes for Tap. JC kind of fills that role as well. So it was good to hear him say that, talk about that, but also talk about, Tap's going to be missed here. Great encourager of people, both players and coaches and people, anyone that he was around. So losing that type of energy and that type of person is going to definitely be a big blow. So I was glad to hear him talk about that, but also glad to hear that he's got the utmost confidence in what JC brings to the table.
Absolutely. And then essentially probably a guy we feel like, Tap brought in, he spoke very highly of Jordan Williams, talking about coming from the Clemson program and, they're winning down there. But kind of the way I kind of felt it, and this is going to sound funny because as he's walking in, it seems like the way he feels is Jordan Williams has walked into that offensive line room and has essentially, I don't know, like got everybody together and say, listen, I know what it takes to win. Follow me. And it seems like just in the hams, like the guys are buying in quick that he's the anchor down in the middle of that line, and he's the guy that they're going to be leaning on.
Well, you immediately talk about a plug and play in terms of probably leadership relative to what we lost with a Gerard Hewitt. But in terms of both size and I'd say at least, upper end capability, I think you're seeing an upgrade at that. So that's going to be big. But what J-Ham talked even more about is, his work ethic and what he's already shown in his short time on campus. And also just the idea of having that veteran presence to be the leadership and leader on that unit and leader in the locker room and at least on the defensive side of the ball in particular.
Absolutely. And again, Ron, you've mentioned it several times about how Jordan Williams, what we're doing on defense, he is the prototypical defensive tackle. And you talk about having that with the work ethic, with the veteran leadership. Essentially you're catching aces on everything. It's awesome. He also did a quick mention of Daly, mentioned how a guy like him playing in the SEC, getting that many starts in the SEC, playing to that level in the SEC, having those sort of statistics. Big thing, obviously, Cap put us on him. Again, sucks losing Darryl. But, it's one of those things where you almost feel like we lost Divine Diablo. And I know he's not built like Divine. But you almost feel like there is a little bit of a buffer, right? Yep, we're losing Divine. We're not going way down. We're only going maybe one or two rungs down. Maybe in the spring, get up to that level.
Yeah, and if he brings there's a thing to be said of parallel skill sets where you get the same overall return, even though they're different type of skills. You know what I'm saying? So there's the potential there if he take those steps in the spring and in the off season, that he can get parallel level production, even if you're not getting the same type of play that you got with Divine Diablo. Now he did also talk about there was a question about spring practice. What's the plan? What's the focus? And this is where, when we were talking about earlier about the we do what we do, this is where the good stuff took place. And this had me roped in. The big thing he said, you don't throw everything out, but you don't carry everything over.
Yes, sir. He said that at Open My Eyes like this. Bug eyes, like, wow.
And again, like I said, I juxtapose that against the we do what we do mentality with offense. And I know offense is different than defense, but I like seeing folks that are willing to evaluate themselves and like I said earlier, throw out what's not working, re-engineer some stuff that's kind of working, but not to where you want it to be, and then keep plugging away at the stuff that looks good. And he talked about, some of the concepts on defense is going to be addition by subtraction, simplifying the things, unifying concepts and making sure that the language that each coach is speaking to these kids is unified across all of them, where they say this, it means the same thing when JC says it, or whether Ryan Smith says it, or whether Jay Ham says it. No matter who is saying it, it's ringing true in the same way. It doesn't mean something different depending on what coach you're talking to.
The other big piece about this, Brian, and he talked about all of that, but the last piece he hit on that, and again, it hit me right. The staff now knows the kids. They didn't get spring last year to know the kids. And as we mentioned, as we got towards the back end of the schedule, you started seeing that defense come together. Dak said it, but they know the kids. They know their limitations. They know what they do well. They know what they don't do good. They know what type of situations to put them in, which tells me, Cam knows I've got to learn my players. Again, it goes back to that same thing. Don't try to force a square peg in a round hole. If it doesn't fit, if the guy can't do that, don't make him go do that. And I love it. Now, speaking of a guy, what you can make him do and what you can't make him do is Devin Taylor. He's going to start out where he finished last year at safety. But the one thing that caught my ear was Ham mentioned that he is a defensive back.
I was going to say, yeah, I mean, he's a defensive back. He's talking about, he's going to start where he finished at safety. Could be moving to corner, could be attached to some of the other positions that are more hybrid. But they want to get him in the spot where they can evaluate him, because they didn't get that chance last year. He came in so late in the process. We were so needy at a position that he got thrown out there, and in a lot of cases, in a very sink or swim type thing, and sometimes he swam and sometimes he sunk. I think one thing they're going to need to work with him big time on in the offseason is going to be tackling. And especially if they're going to keep him at safety, they definitely need to work with him on tackling. But you saw flashes, and I think if they can get some consistency to that after they get that eval period, then he could be a big player for us, or at least the player we need him to be.
Yeah, you talk about the flashes. There were times last year, a lot of times he was just in the right spot at the right time, which tells you he's a heady player. The tackling thing, I know it does worry you, Brian, but let me ask this. How many times, or think about Devin Taylor, he hadn't played, since November of 2019. He didn't get a spring. He showed up basically, fall camp was over. So do you think going almost 9 months without hitting anybody, could that have affected him and lowered it down? Or is it one of those things where after the first few hits, he should have been in there?
It could be, man, because we're talking about all of those factors and making a jump in terms of competition level. So there's two factors there. It's not just you didn't have this stuff. It's like you didn't have this stuff, and all of a sudden the competition level is jumping up. So it's going to be very similar to some of these high school kids that are coming in that potentially could have been impact players as true freshmen, but they haven't played in a fucking year. So the opportunity is still there, but it's less likely than it was before, because they're not only making that big jump, but they haven't had the off-season stuff that they're used to.
Absolutely. Now, the next guy I talked about was Dax, and whether you love or hate Dax, and I feel like with Hokie Nation, there is no middle ground with him. There are people that love him, they love the enthusiasm, and then there are people that hate anything he does. He could do the game-sealing interception, and, he could have taken it upfield. And you're like, Jesus Christ, okay. But the one thing he said about Dax, and it made sense. Dak was a super highly rated player. Dax was recruited by everybody in the country. So he really talked about how he had the expectation the day he stepped foot on campus. There was no, you have to earn it. No, dude, there
was no easing in. And because of a lot of the things that he walked into, he got thrown into the fire quick too. So he's always been, since he's been on campus, he's been in front of us. Yep. And I think it's hard to grow when everybody's watching.
Absolutely.
So I think there's some of that attached to that. There's some of the fact that he probably should be playing Mike and not backer, attached to some of the sentiments that a lot of us have about his play. And I think one of the things that J-Ham talked about a lot during this and about Dax in particular is, that he likes to learn it. He likes to pick things up and figure it out. And he's not just learning one position. He's learning pretty much every position on the defense, what they're doing, how they're doing it. So that means he's got the ability upstairs to get guys where they need to be at the mic position. The big thing for me is going to be, I think he's got all the ability in the world. And I think from a athletic perspective, while he wasn't athletic as we would like to be at backer, he's probably actually a slight step up at Mike compared to what we were getting with Rook in terms of athleticism. So if he can get some of the other things that he has struggled with, which is tackling, which is shedding blockers, if he can get really good at those things in the offseason, or at least better than he has been, that's going to be a pretty big jump for him in terms of what he does on the field, I think, personally. So, again, I haven't been very high on Dax, especially if you go back and listen to some of the podcasts, especially the beginning of the season last year. But he came along as the season went on, and I think that the move to Mike is going to help him.
Absolutely. Next thing that Coach Ham hit on was just defensive line in general. Deshaun Crawford, Emmanuel Belmar coming back, big veterans on the team, having that sort of leadership on your line along with the Jordan Williams. That defensive line where last year, Brian, me and you were looking like, we're kind of thin. We're not this year.
No.
We're going to be – it's going to almost be to a point like it was on the offensive line last year where we're looking, it's like you've got Fuga, you've got Williams, you've got Crawford, you got Belmar, you got Barno, you got Garbutt coming back, you got Kendricks. That's 8 right there, and I'm missing defensive ends. I know.
Oh, you got Wooten and Alec Bryant. You got the guys coming in. So, there's going to be a lot of potential for the defensive line, especially this year. I think we're good depth wise. I think in a year or two we're going to need a lot more defensive tackles coming in. But for 2021, we're looking pretty good across the whole defensive line. I'm really looking forward to what this unit can do, especially with the way Barno came on. I think the thing Jay Ham was talking about most is that you had a good year, you progressed significantly within a short period of time. Don't stop getting better. Just because you're at good, don't stop just because you're good. Keep going, keep working hard, keep doing the little things.
Yeah, keep doing the little things. He also talked about, somebody asked about playing weight, and he said he's going to let the essentially strength staff to determine that, because I like the way he said it. I don't need him to play at a certain number. He's like, he needs to get to a weight where he can still, it's almost like he can be functional. He can do what he does best, but it doesn't stress him. It doesn't hurt him. Essentially, don't put weight, just put weight on. If you play ungodly at 240, play at 240. That's your weight. And it's one of those things, Brian, I know you can attest to it. Robert Mathis. Everybody in the National Football League said Robert Mathis is too strong or too small to play defensive end at 235 pounds. No,
Incorrect.
He wasn't. Incorrect. But I like the way I'm saying that, because I think for his players, you get to a good weight, hey, coach, I'm 245. How you feeling? Feeling good. Play. Because even if you're 245 and you go out there and ball, that tape's going to show. You're going to make it somewhere. The last couple pieces he hit, Brian, was kind of more about JC, and somebody asked about the deep connections with it. And, essentially back 2012, 2013, he wanted to start visiting other coaches and learn. And JC was one of the first guys he reached up to at Marshall. And again, I think it's the Hokie brotherhood that you hear so many of these guys talk about. And in having that, he mentioned talking about, and essentially pressed this upon he's going to press this upon his kids, make your connections, because in a few years, older guy could be asking you for a job, or you could be asking a younger guy for a job. That's essentially how JC happened, because of JC's connections with Ham going up to Marshall, visiting with him. JC introduced him to circles, and then Marshall coming down to Virginia Tech. Coach Fuente had invited him, and JC always there, always connecting with them. And you feel like that, there's a mesh that he even mentioned, talking about Bill Tiernick having the line and everything. Like, he found this perfect puzzle piece, and it fit right in. He's a Hokie. He's one of the all-time guys. He's a guy that's busted his ass to get where he is, and now he gets to come home. And, it's a pretty cool story. I hope they can write a hell of a chapter this year.
Yeah, it's gonna be pretty big, seeing what he's able to do in this system and how he can kind of step into that tap role, and maybe even in some areas be kind of a plus in that role compared to what we were getting with Tap there. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. I love what Jay Ham was talking about understanding the importance of those connections and engaging with others, and how that can come into play either a year from now or 10 years from now. But he also talked a little bit about the recruiting role that Price is going to step into with coordinating for the defense. And, I like what he said there. Going to be talking about, who the kid's talking about, who within that kid's orbit you need to connect with to make sure that, you're on the right page with the people that are important to that kid. Coordinate back to the coaches what's been said to that kid. What needs to be said to that kid, all of those type of things, that's going to be important for that role. So he highlighted that, and I think that was kind of good insight into what, kind of the progress this team is making on the recruiting front, even if it's not quite happening as fast as we would like it to.
Yep. Well, we're in a now society. Everybody wants now. But that orbit thing you talked about, because he even said it, he's like, uncles, coaches, trainers, pastors, know everybody. Because if you connect with one of them, that potential, if you connect with the, his uncle Jim, and he loves Uncle Jim, and you have great conversations with Uncle Jim. Uncle Jim is able to translate some of the stuff you're saying to him, and it's Uncle Jim saying it, not the coach from Virginia Tech. That's when it starts coming in. It's like, well, hold on. If Uncle Jim likes what he's saying, and I understand what he's saying, and I like it, okay, maybe this is where I go. Yeah. All right, Brian, let's just go ahead and beat up on everybody's favorite punching bag in the Hokies community currently.
Pete Morris.
Pete Morris. We're gonna hit him because there's a couple things that happened. We already mentioned it earlier with the Normwood tweet.
If you stream the presser in real time, you do not have to refute these clickbait headlines or clickbait tweets or all this stuff. It's already there. People that were interested have already seen it. And if someone comes out with this bullshit, you can, in real time, before it becomes a narrative, back it up with actual footage that can say, hey, that's not what he said. Here's what was said in context.
Yeah.
It's a no-brainer. Stop missing the layups. Stop missing the layups.
But it's also a funny point, because you talk about not only they can do it, but we, Hokie Nation, can do it. Because if that thing had been streamed live, and there's probably 300-400 people listening to it, probably on Twitter like we are, see Norm does that, they're all over him the second he tweets it. Bullshit, Norm. Bull. You need to take this down, and you need to put it exactly how it's contextualized. You're trying to get clicks. You're trying to write a narrative. We don't like it. And then the whole piece becomes, as people start looking at that and saying, why are all these people saying what he said was wrong? Oh, they listen. Oh, here's the clip. Oh, Norm's full of shit. Not a shock. What about the other thing, Brian? We're listening to it. There's 23 minutes of Jay Hams, and we're sitting here. He's getting to a really good piece, and seriously.
Jay Ham was talking about his family and some other stuff, and all of a sudden the feed ends. I don't think there was any other questions after that, but he cut him off before he finished the answer he was giving to the last question, or whatever context he was speaking on at that time as he was closing things out. Probably not anything of importance there, but you don't cut somebody off in the middle of a sentence just to do it. So that was kind of weird to me. And it looks unprofessional, especially since you're putting that on your website for any and everyone to listen to.
Yeah.
Especially.
Exactly. All right, Brian. So let's just go ahead and just do it. You know, we watched both of them. Give me what you felt and kind of what we discussed as the biggest differences between the J Ham presser and the COMM presser.
The way J Ham engages with the members of the press corps is not only significantly better, but impressive in its own right. Praise the good questions that were coming out. Makes observations about people in the press corps that are on the Zoom call. I think he called out Mike Barber having some of his children's drawings in the background on the Zoom call. So he understands that those personal aspects of these type of things matter. These engagements matter. It's good for the fan base. It's good for the media. It's good for everything. There's no reason to be combative with these folks because they're trying to do their job most of the time. And, you know, when it comes time to something like the Norm Wood tweet, you have a leg to stand on if you've been engaging with the media, whether you've been open with the media. If you're not open, they write the narrative themselves. But when you have stuff like this, it helps that relationship, and it helps when you do have some sort of beef with something that is written or tweeted. You feel like you've got some sort of leg to stand on with your argument.
Absolutely, Brian. Absolutely. Write your narrative. Write your narrative. Don't let them write it. Brian, checking out here. I don't think anything's broken. I don't think we picked up our second commitment of the day.
Not yet, man.
Not yet. You guys will hear about that on a separate episode coming at you soon here. There's nothing left, Brian. It's late, man. The snow keeps falling. It's going to be a fun day tomorrow. And that's going to wrap up this episode of the Boundary Corner podcast. I'm Curtis Wilson.
I'm Brian Siegler.
Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and subscribe to the podcast on your favorite source, including Spotify, Amazon, and Apple Podcasts. As always, we let our buddy Jason Long play us out. Catch him on Spotify and Apple Music. We thank you for listening, and as always, let's go
Hokies!